from around the world are meeting this week in Johannesburg. Increasingly, the right to information is being seen as a human right. Since 2003, these officials have been meeting every 2 years under the auspices of the International Conference of Information Commissioners. South Africa's official Information Commissioner, Advocate Pansy Tlakula, has been involved in the organization of this year's event. She has recently also led an African Union initiative to produce a model law on access to information and to develop guidelines around transparency during elections. Well, to discuss, we're joined by Advocate Pansy Tlakula in studio now. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you very much for having me.
How is information an asset? How is it power, knowledge, all these things you're talking about?
I think the first thing to say is that the right of access to information is a human right. I think that's where we have to start. And
why is it a human right?
It is entrenched in our constitution as a human right. It is entrenched in a number of international human rights instruments, even in the African Charter on Human and People's Rights. So the starting point is that the right of access to information is a very important right. It is central to the enjoyment of all other rights.
So what comes out of this conference? How is it crucial in promoting transparency and promoting that access?
This conference has brought to South Africa information commissioners and ombudsmen from more than 39 countries all over the world. And we are very proud to say that out of the 39, 10 come from the African continent. We also have civil society organizations. And the theme is really international cooperation to strengthen access to information, to look at where we have been, what are the current challenges, what are the battles that have been won, and what are the challenges that are remaining. There are emerging challenges in this field. If you look at the whole issue of privacy, the issue of big data, artificial insemination, all that has brought to the fore, you know, the new challenges in the area of access to information, because as we push for access to information in many fields, we also have to balance that against the right to privacy.
And we'll talk about that balancing act. Firstly, you said you're looking where things have been done well and where the challenges are. Let's start with things being done well. Are there countries with a benchmark? I don't know, this wonderful model for access to information.
Well, I think the thing to say, and I can talk for the African continent because that's where I have worked, to say that it is encouraging that a large number of African countries have adopted access to information laws. That's a step in the right direction. At some point, about 6 years ago, we had only 5 countries with ATI laws. Now, the countries have increased to about 25. The remaining challenge really is the implementation of these laws. Oversight bodies have been created, which are information commissioners. Most of them are poorly resourced and are unable to execute their mandates. And as we move along, in many countries, there are issues of national security that arise now and again. And we find that we need to carefully balance the right of access to information with the need to protect national security. Now, if you look at it, most of the time on some countries, you know, national security is defined very broadly, and it's at times used to promote secrecy. So we need to watch these incidents.
So this is so interesting because it's come up in the news of late, the parliamentary committee looking at state security. That happens behind closed doors. Some people are saying that's not fair. So this is a constant balance. Security, privacy, against access to information.
Exactly, but I think the thing to say is that from where I sit, the right of access to information has to be the norm, and privacy and the need to protect state security has to be an exception. We have to promote transparency and openness, and only when we have transparency and and openness can we foster good governance? And that's where I start from.
So you're also looking at elections, transparency rules around elections, and this issue comes up. Candidates have a right to privacy, but they're out there, they're campaigning, and their characters, things are going to be called into question. Is there a cap on how dirty the electioneering campaigning can be?
Well, I think when we look at issues of access to information and privacy, we tend to look at political parties only. But I am a firm believer of the fact that when we talk about transparency in elections, it has to apply across the board, not only to political parties, but to all stakeholders. I constantly say the media is one of those organizations that has to be transparent. They have to tell us if they are politically affiliated. They must not come out and tell us that they are objective. Let them come out and tell us that we support this particular party. We have to know as citizens and as the electorate, you know, the kind of guidelines that you use to, you know, to say that on this channel you will appoint this political, what do you call them? Commentator, yes. This political commentator to come and appear on your channel. What criteria do you identify, A or B? So these kinds of things are things that have to come out in the open. So openness applies to everybody, particularly during the electoral process. But having said that, it's also important to balance that openness against privacy, so that in whatever we do, we have to ensure that we don't compromise the privacy of the electorate. We don't unnecessarily expose their sensitive personal information. These are new areas, and we need to find a balance. And this conference is going to look at that issue as well.
So there's a big case, and I know you can't speak on it specifically. Julius Malema recently giving a journalist, Karima Brown's cell phone number out, and she said she was bullied, harassed, threatened by supporters. What does our current law say around things like that? Or can you give us your personal opinion on something?
Well, it is very difficult because I do not know the facts as to where that telephone number comes from, who put it on in the public domain. But if it's indeed correct that it was put by him, then, you know, a telephone number is sensitive information. But I think we need to not only look at that, you must also remember that Jacques Paul also had put Julius Malema's address in there. So these are new issues. We live in a country now where we have the protection of personal information, and we have to ensure that a person's personal information is not exposed unfairly, because it can endanger their lives in so many ways.
And surely that's a warning to anybody using social media at the moment.
Exactly, and also that there are two aspects to it. When the people who are, you know, the companies that are operating the social media have to ensure that they put adequate security measures in place to ensure that our personal information is protected and secure. But on the other hand, if a person goes out and puts out their personal information in public, that information becomes public information and is not protected.
Let's end off. You were involved in an African model law on access to information. Is there a difference, kind of world standards versus an African law? Do we need a specific standard for us? And how are we doing when it comes to access to information?
I must say that the model law, I think, of the African Union, it's quite progressive. It's a progressive piece of legislation. Why we drafted that law is after realizing that very few countries had adopted access to information laws on the continent. And when we tried to find out why, we found that they did not have a prototype, you know, kind of guide that they could use.
So this gives them a benchmark.
So this gives them a benchmark, and we thought, and we put together African experts so that we can sit and draft a model law that will talk to our issues. And after we drafted and adopted that model law, as I've indicated, the number of countries with access to information laws increased from 5 and to about 25. So we have laws, that's a good start, but as I've indicated, the implementation of the laws remains a big challenge, not only on the African continent, but elsewhere in the world. So the people who are here for this conference. We have people from Europe, we have people from Latin America, we have people from Asia, and when we share ideas and we exchange best practices, you find that our problems are similar. The demand is huge and the resources are not sufficient.
Will your office be looking at a guideline for people who are wondering, should I have access to that information? So you were talking about media houses. I know the SABC would like its editorial policies to be known, because yes, hold us in check against those editorial policies.
Yes.
But what if I guess there are a lot of people who believe they may have a right to the access to access certain information, but they're not sure.
Oh, well, SABC is a public institution, and I say that public institutions hold information not for themselves. That's public information. So they're just holding that information as custodians for the public. So all of us have to put ourselves out in the sunshine. One commissioner who from Canada was saying that if you go to her website, the Information Commission of Canada, you're going to see information about the amount of money that she spent to attend this conference. Before she left, she had to put out that information out in the public because she is using public money. And we should, all of us, eventually come to that, so that we put ourselves out in the public, so that especially those of us who are in public office. All
right, so know your rights, and it's a human right. Thank you very much, Advocate Pansy Tlakula, the chairperson of the Information Regulator of South Africa. Back to